Welcome on in, guys. Three bold takes yet again, and we are back with some more overreactions. But before we do that, first off, we are sponsored by SeatGeek. So if you go to use SeatGeek, whether you're buying tickets, you're buying parking for a game, anything like that, use our code Three Bold Takes. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Link will be in the description. Again, at Three Bold Takes, get $20 off. I wanted to talk about, obviously, the Georgia-Alabama game, and we've already kind of discussed Ryan Williams, so if you haven't already, go watch that specific video. This one's going to be more so focused on the Georgia aspect of it, and it may be – I just want to give my thoughts about Georgia overall, right? It seemed like they were unprepared in the first half. After having a bye week the week before, they were off. And maybe they were off tempo because of the bye week, but traditionally that's not the case. Traditionally, you get healthy, you get ready, and you play better after a bye week. Boys, Georgia's in trouble. And there's different reasons than they just got beat by Alabama on the road. Do you know how many 5-star and top 100 recruits were at that game? It was absurd, the number of recruits that was there.
Yeah, when it like over 100 or 80 or something like that.
Yeah, it was like 80 of like the top 150 or 200 in the country were at that game, which is absurd. And to have two freshmen on the team make two of the game-sealing plays for Alabama is a huge deal. And that's a huge deal for the Alabama side. But when it comes to Georgia, man, they're in trouble. They lost the game. And with the rest of their schedule, they go on the road to Texas. That one's going to be extremely tough because Quinn Ewers is supposed to be back, obviously. They play Oklahoma and a couple more before they play Georgia, so they've got some tests. They go on the road at Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss just lost to Kentucky at home. However, it's still going to be a very tough game for Georgia. Then they host Tennessee, who might be one of the two best teams in the entire SEC. So when you look at those three games by themselves, not including the fact that they still have to play Auburn, they still have to play Florida, like, yes, those are easier games, but when they're sandwiched in between those three juggernauts, you never really know. So there's an issue in recruiting because of this game. There's an issue in this season because of this game. Now let's talk Kirby Smart. The fact that a lot of people were talking about, oh, it's a Nick Saban thing, the reason why Kirby Smart can't get over the hump. All those people have been shut up. And not only are they shut up, like, they're like duct tape their mouth shut. Like, never speak of that again, because now that makes Kirby 1-6, right, against Alabama. Georgia by themselves is 1-9 in the past 10 meetings against Alabama. Granted, one of them was a national championship. Good for you, buddy. What else? All right, that's 10 meetings, and that's the only win. They're in some serious trouble this season and going forward with Kalen DeBoer here. Now, keep in mind, dude, like, yes, Kalen DeBoer, coach of the year last year, but he is a first-time head coach in the SEC, and this man is already recruiting the way he is if you look at next year's recruiting numbers. The staff that he put together is unlike any other so far. Like, what he did within a month was unreal, right? And then his actual coaching and offense, like revamping, is next level. Kirby Smart, it's time to start talking about Kirby Smart. May not be the best head coach in college football. I mean, if he can't beat a single team, I'm not going to sit here and say that that's a definite, but it's definitely worth a conversation if this continues moving forward.
Yeah, I want to take the reins on this one first. I actually came out in the offseason. I said Georgia looks like they have 3 losable games on their schedule this season. And when you look at the Kirby Smart dilemma, it's really hard. I just don't see anybody above him currently. And I know he just lost, but long standing, I don't see anybody currently that is better than Kirby Smart. They came out flat in this game, which was just horrible. Like 30-7, you can't do that. If they played both halves of football like they did that second half last night, this is a totally different ball game. And I think Alabama gets dominated, honestly, because they had a superb second half. Their defense came out and played like never, like I hadn't seen.
Well, you can say the same thing about Alabama playing both halves the way they did.
Alabama did let off. Let's not forget that too. But I think your biggest thing that you look at with this game, Carson Beck, no turnovers this season, and then you throw three in this game.
And
That's
a
just
fumble.
yeah, and a fumble. So Carson Beck did not play his best game here. I think the Georgia Bulldogs, when you look at the 2 weeks prior when they played at Kentucky, they struggled there too. Carson Beck did not have a pretty game there. So maybe you because this it falls back on the head coach as well. But maybe you're looking at Carson Beck like, okay, you were supposedly a top two, top three quarterback in the nation. You're not playing like a guy that's even in the top 10 currently. And I think this Georgia team over the season, like you mentioned, Freddie, if this was a lot different if you play Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee all in a row. Okay. But you got some nasty games littered in between those. You got Auburn and Mississippi State before Texas. Mississippi State shouldn't be too bad, but you got Auburn, who's always a little scrappy. Auburn hasn't been good the first few games of the season, but they're gonna bang you up a little bit more. Then you got Texas, and then I know what Quinn's gonna say, but I'm gonna say it anyway. After Texas, you get a bye week, and then Florida, which it's a rivalry game, but it is Florida. You know, there's a shot that they might get a little better as the season goes, and then you have Ole Miss and Tennessee back to back. Then you finish off the season with Georgia Tech, who has already been scrappy. I think Georgia still wins that rivalry game at the end of the year, but it's still a scrappy Georgia Tech team that you have to play. I said in the offseason, three losses potentially. You're looking at four now because you go to Ole Miss, you go to Texas, and then you have Tennessee at home. Hopefully, Georgia gets better over as the season goes. But as of right now, and the way this schedule unfolds, this is not a pretty dilemma to have for them and for Kirby Smart because Kirby Smart, you had an offseason, hey, you're the best coach in the nation. Hey, you know what? College football isn't it anymore. Maybe you should go be the head coach of the Falcons because you're just this superb, amazing, elite coach to ever grace the game. And now you're looking at a season where you just almost had a shot to be in the playoffs and the national championship. Now you're looking at, hey, I'm looking down the barrel of a 3-4 loss season, and I still have a lot intact. And is it because I lost Lad McConkey? I lost Brock Bowers? Is that why? Is I put too much faith in Carson Beck? I don't know, but this Georgia team, it doesn't look good for them, as mentioned, Quinn.
Let me start with this. I mean, Georgia still looks like Georgia to me. They struggled offensively in the first half. The only thing that was abnormal was how much they gave up defensively in the first half to Alabama, but I want to give a lot more credit there. I think it was just a really, really good opening script by DeBoer because usually you script out 10 to 25 plays. They didn't use up 25 plays until they got done with their third drive. And by then they'd already put up three scores. So I do think that played a lot into that part was the one part that caught me off guard, but they fought hard through the second half. I don't want to discredit the fact that Georgia came back
Yeah.
down 30-7
Yeah.
and stormed back to have the lead with 2:30 left. Like that's impressive. What this game showed me is both of these teams are playoff caliber teams. And Georgia now is unfortunately on the losing side of this game, which means their back is the one on the wall. And that sucks for Georgia because I said coming into this game, whoever lost, this game was important. And this was me attacking people who said, like, oh, there's no importance because of the 12 team playoff. This game was important because a loss is going to put you really chasing for the rest of the year. You look
Yeah.
at Georgia's remaining schedule. Look, I don't buy the Auburn game as a scary game. The game's in Georgia. Auburn has looked really rough this year. I do not expect Peyton Thorne to be able to get any kind of consistency throwing the ball against Georgia's defense whatsoever. So I expect Georgia to pull away in that one. Mississippi State, same deal. That is not a roster capable of hanging with Georgia for 4 quarters. It's just not. Florida, if you want to push me on the Florida game being a good game, I'll listen to you. Um, you won't sell me on it, but I'll listen to you. Like it's a bye week going into the Florida matchup. Florida has struggled for years now. I don't think they have the gumption to hang in a game for 60 minutes with Georgia. Same problem for Georgia Tech. Same thing for UMass. So really, we're looking at 3 football games. We're looking at Texas, at Ole Miss, home game against Tennessee. You got to have 2 of them.
Yeah.
If you drop two of those games, you drop the 3 losses. I don't think you're a playoff team with 3 losses. It'll be close.
Yeah.
You might squeak in as a bottom like 11th seed, but it's going to be really narrow. If you only lose one of those games, you're definitely in the playoff. All right. I think the most likely L is the Texas game on the road. All right. Georgia's not the same team away from Sanford Stadium as they are in Sanford Stadium. I don't think Ole Miss can hang with Georgia. I'm going to put that out there right now. I don't trust Lane Kiffin in that big of a game. I expect Ole Miss to drop that game somehow, some way. So really, it all hinges on, do you beat Tennessee when they come into Sanford Stadium? That's really what their season hinges on, to me. Now, obviously, if you can jump out and get a win on Texas right off the bat, you set yourself up smooth sailing the rest of the way, I think. But we'll see. I'm not gonna get on here and say that Georgia's in any danger, though. I mean, obviously they have no room for error, but I still favor them against everybody they play except for Texas going down the stretch.
Yeah, and this is kind of the last thing here that I have. The reason why, if you would have asked me before this Bama game, do you think that Georgia goes 3-1 in that 4-game stretch, or do you think they go, or I guess at that point, Texas, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Bama? Yeah, so the 4 games. If you asked me before, do they go 3-1 in those 4 games, or do they go 2-2 in those 4 games? I would have told you before the Alabama game that they were at least going 3-1, if not 4-0. Now, since we've seen they only played 2 good quarters against Clemson on both sides of the ball. They didn't play a single good quarter against Kentucky, right? And then of course they did, against the other game where they just blew out the competition, whatever. And then they only played really 2 good quarters against Alabama. So I've seen about the same amount of good football as I've seen really bad football from Georgia. So if you ask me right now, I say from here on out in those 3 games, they have a better chance of losing 2 of them than they do winning 2.
Well, and I think a big thing I want to add on here is that you got to remember in 2024, the SEC has what? No divisions. So it's the top 2 teams that are going to get in the SEC championship game. And if you mess up and lose another one, is Georgia going to be able to make that game? They can still sneak in the back end of the playoffs, like Quinn mentioned, but that's a big thing Georgia's got to be looking at too now that they're behind the 8 ball.
Look, and I'll end it with this. This will be my last thing I say about that. Before we get on here and start trying to pitch the idea that Georgia might miss the playoff and lose 3 games this year, since the turn of the decade in 2020, there is only one football team not named Alabama that has defeated Georgia, and it was the 2020 Florida Gators. That's it. That's it. That's the only team. So It's hard for me to really get on here and believe that they're going to drop 2 more games this season when I haven't seen it in years.
It's a good point.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks for watching. Code 3 bold takes at SeatGeek. $20 off your first purchase. Freddie, Chase, and Quinn, we're out.